Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Intersection speaker series. Tonight we're lucky enough to have Ben Sussman-Hyde, who's going to talk about sports and technology. I want to thank everyone at my center for putting this together. Thank you to Bridget Parrish for making this happen. And thank you to the RLB Library for hosting us tonight. So thank you very much for that. So I'd like to introduce Ben. Ben was with the Orioles for a number of years, and he's going to talk to us tonight about his experiences with sort of this evolution of sports and technology, and I'm really excited. We'll do the presentation, then we'll take questions at the end, and I'll ask questions, and if anyone else joins us online, they can ask some questions. Yeah, so here you go. Let me bring up your screen, and here you go. Share that with there you go. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Greg. This is really exciting. Glad to get a chance to talk some baseball for the next 30 to 45 minutes. So let's start. I think what the best thing to do is just to kind of cover broadly what kind of I did, and then kind of talk about kind of what's going on within the industry in terms of information and technology, and then we can kind of just go from there, and I'll open the forum for some questions. So we'll cover different types of scouting, the history of pitch data, exploring pitch shapes on the movement chart, which is what a lot of teams are doing right now, and playing around with different data and radar tracking, and then how teams are leveraging modern pitch data, and then what is missing from the data, and then how pitch data and technology are changing the game of baseball. So let's first talk about the different types of scouting. There are really four different types of scouting. Kind of three are what you think of where you're really trying to analyze players for the purpose of acquiring players. So the first one is professional scouting, which is just scouting majors and minor league baseball. And then there's amateur scouting, which is bringing players into the organization. This could be from college, high school, or independent leagues. And then there's international scouting, which is kind of the same thing, but you're doing this overseas. And I included in there international leagues or competitions because recently the Pittsburgh Pirates actually scouted someone who was playing cricket. They went to, I think it was South Africa, and they recruited a cricket player. So that can be, a new avenue of talent. And then there's what I did, which is called advanced scouting, which is very different than kind of the three primary scouting methods. This is mainly just being with the team and analyzing the opposing players for the team you're about to play. So this is a lot of data synthesis and a lot of video analysis, and just figuring out what's the best way to prepare your team for the opponents. And we can kind of go through how this profession has changed a lot. And really within the past 5 years, predictive models and new performance tracking technology has rapidly changed advanced scouting. I've been doing this for 10 years, and when I first started, it was really just one guy or two guys kind of just watching video, and the reports were very basic, and you were kind of limited with information. And now it's much more nuanced and much more accurate in the information that we're giving players. When this profession first started, it was all done in person. So teams would send 1 to 2 players on the road to games, covering the opponent that they were about to play. This was called sitting on an opponent, and you would go for two to three series. You kind of write down some basic information about players you were going to see, and then you report back to players and coaches and kind of relay important information. And then about 10 years ago, when I first started, video-based analysis took over. So they took these people off the road, and everything was done in-house by watching video. And that made it much more efficient. You could produce a lot more reports, and it was the information got a lot more accurate. And then within the past 3 or 4 years, predictive modeling has really taken over, and this has done a lot to change the game. One, it's taken away a lot of human analysis, for good and for bad, and then it's also become much more accurate. And we can kind of go over the rest of this is going to be about predictive modeling and what is currently done in advanced scouting. So just kind of rundown of what I was doing. What does a modern advanced scout do? It's often divided into specialties. So it's someone in charge of run creation or run prevention. So it's working with either the hitting department or the pitching department to basically create offense or provide information for the defenders or the pitchers. And what I would do, every day was review the models with the manager before the games to create an optimized lineup. So the model we have, which we'll go over, is taking pitch information from the pitcher you're going to face that night, and the model knows specifically what the pitcher throws, the movement characteristics of those pitches, and then it knows based on similar pitches historically how those pitchers have done, and then it knows our hitters, what type of movement profiles they do well against, and it kind of matches them up and produces an optimized lineup. So it's reviewing that information and creating I guess like the best 9 players for that night. Along those same lines, you're working with the coaches to devise pitcher-specific training regimens. So, which we'll talk about in the end, there's now this technology where you can precisely input the different types of pitches that the pitcher throws. So let's say that night we're up against a guy who throws his best pitch is like a high fastball. We can plug that into the pitching machine and say we want to practice only high fastballs for the next couple hours. Or if it's a guy who has a really good changeup, we can tell our players we need to focus on changeups tonight. So it's working with the coach to devise training regimens, and then it's making players and staff aware of any changes. So this could be the model's really good at looking at a lot of data going back several years, but we really want to focus on the very, very recent data. So what has changed in the last week? Maybe the pitcher is throwing a new pitch. Maybe their strategy has changed and they're throwing the pitches at different locations. So it's my job to kind of look at the most recent trends and communicate that. And then, so focus on recent trends. Oh, I should say, one thing that, overall team, something you look at is overall team gameplay, right? So maybe, if we're facing the Red Sox, maybe they're recently decided to, change their infield in defense. So when we have a runner on third base, maybe they're playing now more likely to play their infield in and try to get the runner at the plate as opposed to make a play at first base. Things of that nature, just overall kind of tendencies that a team is doing that might influence how a manager might call a game. And then obviously just kind of like broad team-based things. So injuries to recent players that might impact strategy. And you want to highlight extreme tendencies. So if there are players who are, if there's a one pitcher that they might face who only throws one pitch, or if there are runners who are really steal a lot of bases, that's important for the manager to know. And then recent pitcher usage. So let's say they're coming, the opponent is coming off a game where they just used all of their bullpen. And some pitchers might not throw it that night's game. That would be important to tell the manager. And so it's just kind of this constant communication of relaying information that is important to the manager, and then also kind of working with these new models to formulate the best team for that competition that night. So now we can start talking about quantifying pitch data. So I don't know, maybe about 30, 40 years ago, scouts really kind of took over and they started, relying on information from people at games. And it was kind of very basic. Scouts would sit behind the plate and they would describe the pitcher's delivery, they would describe the pitch movement, and they would write, pretty generic reports, pretty simple reports, and they would turn that information into players and coaches. This was, the only piece of technology they had was a radar gun, and it was, not, sometimes these guns were not very accurate, and it was really just, very just basic and imprecise data. And a lot of the terminology that these scouts used is still used today. And we'll kind of go over some of the terms for different pitches. But, like I said, the data was imprecise. And importantly, it wasn't very actionable, right? Like it was, here's what this player is doing, but what does that mean? How is this going to impact how we play or how we can approach this game, right? It was kind of disconnected. And, to that point, pitchers had limited feedback and kind of no plan for improvement, right? If they wanted to know, how can I get better, or how can I, what do I need to do to prepare for this team? It wasn't very clear. And I'd say about 5-10 years ago is when high-speed cameras took over, and this is kind of really the start of the kind of the data and the technological revolution within pitch data. Here's a video of kind of what high-speed cameras can do. So as you can see from that video, you can clearly see, the release of the ball in very detailed, almost like the seam orientation. You can see the finger pressure. You can see the wrist position. So this kind of opened up a whole new world of data for teams. The main thing with these cameras was they allow pitchers to precisely see how they release the ball. And you can start to link your physical modifications, finger pressure, thumb placement, how you're gripping the seams, how your wrist is oriented with how the ball moves. And, these are professional athletes, so they're very in tune with their body. They're very good at knowing just from repetition, if I can put my finger here, or if I hold the baseball this way, it's going to make the ball move, which way. And this was very powerful information. And more importantly, this equipment was inexpensive. It was easy to use, and the videos were shareable. So a lot of players first with their they would get these videos and they would share them with personal coaches or family, or the files were small, the clips were small, clips were only 3 seconds, so it was just very portable and very consumable. Teams started to invest heavily. So once this came out and teams realized that this is a powerful tool and that more importantly it worked, they could kind of scale up with it. And teams started buying these cameras in mass. I think the Astros were one of the first teams to invest in this, and they bought, I think it was 7 or 8 for each affiliate. So the major league club had 7 or 8 cameras, and each minor league team had 7 or 8 cameras. Limitations of this: you still couldn't quantify pitch data, right? So you can, if you throw a ball, you say, okay, I know I'm releasing it this certain way. There's no way to tell exactly how much the ball is moving, or if that pitch is even good or bad. It just, you're only really know how to release it and how it kind of feels to you. So you're still limited with your information. And then I'd say about 3 to 4 years ago, radar systems really took over, and the 2 of the most prominent ones are TrackMan and Hawkeye. And this is, the combination of these radar systems and these high-speed cameras have really transformed how teams operate within baseball. This is kind of the TrackMan dashboard, which is just common throughout the league now. These are only, I don't know what, 9 data points here, but with TrackMan, you can get up to, I think, 20 to 25 different data points, from release speed to spin rate, induced vertical break, horizontal break, release height, even to, which we'll talk about, is like tilt, right? So if we'll talk about kind of the arm angle and how that factors into pitches. But all this new data opened up about 5 to 7 years ago. And precise pitch characteristic data, several new variables, and again, this is relatively inexpensive and easy to install. So that's important because players can kind of, these Major League Baseball players, they can afford these devices on their own. And in the off season, they can practice on their own and they can become familiar with it. And teams can also, add them pretty easily to their training facilities and their Major League parks. They come out with two versions: There's a portable version for practice sessions, and then a mounted version for games, which is key because that gives teams ability to study the pitch effects in real world environments. And more importantly, Major League Baseball signed off on this being allowed in ballparks. And you can organize data and chart movement. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about for the next, several slides, is just how teams are organizing this data and charting movement. So with that, we've come to this pitch movement chart here. And this is a lot of information right here, and we'll go through it. But this is kind of currently, this is kind of the bread and butter of what teams look at when they analyze pitchers and they analyze, pitch movement, how pitchers pitch. So on the x-axis, you have horizontal break. On the y-axis, you have induced vertical break. What is induced vertical break? That's just the amount a pitch resists dropping due to gravity because of its backspin. So basically, it's trying to figure out how much, just taking gravity out of the equation. How much is this going to stay up in the zone or drop? To what the pitch would appear to be doing. And the way to quantify this is just if you think about drawing a line between the pitcher's mound and home plate. Pitchers with greater X values are more movement towards third base. Pitchers with smaller Y values have more movement, so like a big curveball would have a lot of drop. And then pitchers with greater Y values have more rise, which is kind of this nebulous term that we'll discuss some more. But it's almost like when a pitch with a lot of backspin it doesn't drop as much as the hitter would expect, and it's called rise. So it kind of stays on plane, and that's been a kind of a revolution the last couple of years. And just the movement is measured in inches. So usually teams categorize pitches by clusters by pitch type. So red is a 4-seam fastball on this chart. Orange is 2-seam fastball. Green is changeup. Dark brown is cutter. Yellow is slider. Light brown is sweeper, and blue is curveball. Sorry, it's kind of like under the orange. Yeah, it's like a bluish green. This is important. One thing it is not showing is pitch location and velocity are not. So this is only movement, right? That trips up a lot of people originally. Is just this is only the movement. There's no velocity and no pitch location on this chart. And tighter clusters equal more consistent pitch shape. So this pitcher right here, this is a major league pitcher right here, and we'll watch some videos of him. But you can see how the clusters are very tightly organized. That means their practice, their movements are all, relatively similar. A lot of minor league pitchers, you'll see these charts, they're kind of spread all over the place, right? Some pitchers they'll have a lot of movement towards third base, some will stay straighter. So one thing you're looking for here is just often the better pitchers kind of have these tighter clusters. And arm angle influences pitch shape a lot. So like, in the chart here, you're seeing in the bottom right, you can see how the arm angle impacts a lot of movements. Like a arm angle that's kind of more up and down, you'd be more likely to have like a more vertical aligned chart. So your fastballs would be probably closer to, probably the y-axis, and then your sliders would be kind of more closer to the x-axis. So let's kind of watch some pitches from this to kind of give you a sense of what this looks like. So this is a 4-seam fastball from this pitcher, and you can see it's the circle on the left. These are the kind of clusters from what this pitch does. It's pretty relatively straight. Some of it is it's hard to see on this video, but some of it is a little movement right to left. And again, these are all 4-seam fastballs. So 4-seam fastballs, they appear straight. And some of the terms that scouts term fastballs having is hop, ride, rise, or carry. Some fastballs that move towards first base are said to have cut. So this fastball right here doesn't have much movement towards first base, and some fastballs that move toward the third base side it's said to have run. So a lot of four-seam fastballs, the kind of purpose of the pitch is to kind of stay straight, and it's often the fastest pitch. So it's going to be you're trying to usually throw it elevated in the zone, and you want to just kind of get it past the hitters with the speed being the primary characteristic. So then there are two-seam fastballs, which is the orange cluster. These pitches are going to have more kind of movement towards third base, which is called arm side run. In addition to run, some two-seam fastballs have drop or sink. The movement profiles for two-seam fastballs, they vary a lot. Some guys throw it and it'll almost be like look like it'll go straight down. Some have like huge run to the arm side. The grips vary a lot. Most four-seam fastballs are thrown with like one grip, but two-seam fastballs, there are a lot of variations to them. And then these are the changeups, which are kind of similar to a two-seamer, as you can see on the chart, but they're more often more drop. And the purpose of a changeup is to appear like a fastball. You want to throw it with the same arm speed, but you want to have reduced velocity. So you're kind of tricking the hitter into thinking this is a fastball, but then it has reduced velocity. There are two different kinds of changeups. There's a four-seam changeup, which is going to stay straighter and is more solely reliant on the velocity differential. And then there's the two-seam changeup, which is going to have more action, kind of more run and more sink. This one right here is I think a two-seam changeup. And then there's also a split finger fastball, which is kind of a different pitch. And it's going on your chart. It's going to be more kind of just more drop and not as much run. That's kind of been the split finger fastball has kind of gained in popularity recently, more so because, we'll talk about in a little bit, but these pitches that have kind of a north-south break are good against both right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters. So it's become more common for pitchers to throw them. Also, it's, often pitchers are either really good at like pronating their pitches or supinating their pitches. So they're either really good at throwing a slider or really good at throwing changeup, but often it's hard to do both. But with a split finger fastball, you're not really pronating or supinating. You're just kind of throwing it like a fastball, and it has the same action as a changeup. So it's become more popular. Here on the chart is our cutters. These are kind of very very limited kind of side to side movement. One thing about cutters is you'll see on the chart, some have the pitch on the on the opposite, on the one side of the line can have some glove side movement, and then also some pitches can have slight arm side movement, and that's called backing up. So you would pitchers this pitch would expect to have more movement towards first base, but some cutters, they end up kind of almost acting like a changeup where they go the opposite direction. And now we get kind of in towards the breaking balls. So this is a slider, which is kind of a shorter breaking ball. Sliders are kind of the most common breaking pitch, and they have a wide variety of shapes. This one here is kind of, as you can see from the clip, it has some lateral movement, also some depth to it. Kind of a short break, and some sliders, as we'll talk about, have kind of really a lot of horizontal movement, and some are almost go straight down. So there's kind of a lot of variations of sliders, and a lot of it's dependent on kind of how you're holding the ball and your arm angle. And kind of what you're trying to accomplish with your slider. Pitchers often use sliders when they're trying to strike hitters out. The term is called strike the ball, and the kind of you'd want to throw it in the strike zone and kind of have it just break out of the strike zone in the last second, so it will induce a swing and miss. Recently, pitchers have developed this pitch called a sweeper, which is kind of like I was talking about, kind of a really big kind of horizontal breaker. As you can see from this pitch, this is sweepers kind of have a lot of lateral movement and typically not much depth or vertical movement. And they've grown in popularity in recent years as these charts have come into play, and teams have realized that these are really effective pitches to use to strike hitters out. just because they, you can throw it in the strike zone and it can go away from the strike zone kind of in a hurry, and you can get a lot of swings and misses with this. It's almost always used as a chase pitch, kind of what I was describing there. Is the purpose is not to throw it for a strike, but to induce a swing and a miss. And then the last pitch we'll talk about is a curveball. Curveballs typically have the most depth of any pitch. They often describe as two terms on like a two hands on a clock. So this one right here is like a straight up and down curveball would be like a 12-6 curveball. Some people throw like a 1-7 curveball. Some people throw a curveball with depth and lateral movement. It's called a slurve. And kind of as very different to the sweeper, the curveballs are often usually much slower. Like this one here is 74 miles an hour. And the purpose is to throw it in the strike zone. So that, pitchers are often throwing these like early in the count where they want to get a strike. They want to get ahead of the hitter. And they're not often used to strike hitters out. So the question would be like, what would a pitch with a 0-0 plot look like? And this is an example of what that would look like. It kind of just stays there. There's hardly any lateral movement to it, and kind of gravity is the only factor in play here. It's just these are kind of called gyro pitches. And if you kind of think of it as like when you release it, almost like has no horizontal spin. It just kind of goes forward, almost like a rifle, like a bullet. If you picture a bullet going through the air, it's just kind of going forward with just like a lot of kind of rifle spin to it. And kind of like what I was saying with the changeup or the splitter, these have actually grown in popularity recently because they do well against both right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters. These kind of gyro sliders where they only stay straight for a while and they just kind of go down the last second. So with this information, teams have done a lot of studies, and they've taken pitches with basically what pitch graders do is they analyze how similar pitches have performed historically. So if a pitcher, let's say like Grayson Rodriguez in the Orioles, he throws his fastball, right? We know how much horizontal movement it has. We know how much vertical movement it has. We know the velocity, and they can determine from there, based on how similar pitches have done historically, how that pitch is done against both right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters. So this is very powerful information. You can quickly identify pitches that are good, pitches that need refinement, and pitches that need to be eliminated altogether. So, if you have a pitcher who is, has, a lot of, if they're throwing their pitches that, maybe they have one really good pitch that they're not using as much, well, we can say, hey, you should throw this more. Or if they have one pitch that, that's really not very good, and you can talk to the pitcher and say, well, this pitch isn't really good. Like, what do you think about it? It's like, oh, well, I don't really, like this pitch very much. You can quickly, kind of scrap that pitch. You can really kind of pinpoint what pitchers throw, and kind of quickly develop, pretty good pitches from that information. Kind of along the same lines, you can kind of highlight players that have untapped potential. So an example is you get a player from another organization, and let's say the Orioles pitch grader has their changeup is a really good pitch. Then this pitcher hasn't been throwing it very often. Well, you can say based on our information, if you threw this pitch a lot more, you'd be more effective. So you can kind of you can really kind of go to players and explain to them if they, how to have a, clear roadmap for development, right? So the good news with these pitch graders is they're available like throughout the organization. So in the minor leagues, you can kind of base your player development plans off of these pitch graders and kind of pinpoint exactly what pitchers need to work on. And these pitch graders have a lot of influence over draft and acquisition strategy. They become more common in, as radar tracking has become more common in the amateur leagues. That gives the team's ability to, develop these pitch graders even in high school and colleges. And one thing to note too is we'll kind of talk about is, it's kind of hard to change without drastically changing your arm slot. It's hard to change your pitch shapes, right? So like if a guy with, you know, a really over the top arm slot, it's hard to get a lot of run or a lot of, you know, movement towards third base on his pitches. So, you know, you can take someone in college and high school and you can say, oh, you know, it's easy to kind of project them forward, just because it's very hard to change the pitch shapes without changing the arm slot. And these pitch graders have become standard within the sport the past 3 or 4 years. You know, the Astros, I think, were one of the first teams to develop these pitch graders, and I think the White Sox were kind of the last team to do it, but they had one last year. I think all 30 teams now have some kind of grading system based off of radar data. So what are some key takeaways from these pitch grade models? You can optimize pitch sequencing strategies. So we'll kind of take a second here to talk about kind of what the overall strategy is that these graders have determined. Typical strategy for most pitchers is using you know, kind of your fast pitches kind of inside on a batter, and then using your kind of slower breaking pitches away. It's called like hard in, soft away, right? So that's kind of the most common strategy for pitchers. And what they've determined is that this is a very, very tough for same side hitters to hit. So like most pitchers, like a right-handed pitcher is going to do, they're going to do much better against right-handed hitters because of this philosophy. You know, a pitch that, you know, is really hard to a pitch that kind of goes in hard on the hands, like a two-seam fastball that goes in on the hands, is really hard to hit. It kind of gets off the barrel, and a pitch that can break away from the barrel in the other direction, you know, so you're kind of playing off these like east and west action. That's really hard to hit, and so you'll often see, you know, right-handed pitchers, when they're facing right-handed hitters, they want to throw these, you know, two-seamers inside of the righties, and then they'll want to throw sliders off that away from hitters to go for the strikeouts. So most pitchers, you know, perform better against same-side hitters, which is called traditional platoon split. Some pitchers show reverse splits. So why would this occur? So kind of what we were talking about with the change-up and the splitters. If you think about like a lefty swinging, lefty kind of like a loop swing, whereas a right-handed hitter has more of like a flat swing. So if a right-handed pitcher to kind of combat that loop swing, if you throw a pitch that kind of breaks more towards third base, like a changeup, like a right-handed changeup does, that's going to kind of go away from the left-handed swing. So a right-handed pitcher with like a really good changeup, or with like a really, you know, kind of like north-south curveball, they tend to have what these called reverse splits, where they're actually better against left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters. And same-side pitches with big horizontal movement are most effective. So that's why the sweeper has become such a big pitch, is because these pitches with these huge, you know, 20+ inches of movement are really effective. And that's not to say that some of the shorter pitches aren't as impactful, but pitchers are really trying to kind of figure out, you know, these big breaking balls, and these kind of, you know, they're going for these fastballs that have, you know, 20 inches of hop or rise, which is like 20 inches of that, you know, against what you expect pitch to be dropping. So that you're really trying to have these like big pitches. And velocity strongly correlates with success. So this is obviously pretty intuitive, as you would think with fastball. Like a 97-mile-per-hour fastball is a lot better than like a 92-mile-an-hour fastball. But what these studies have determined is that this is especially true with breaking balls. So you see a lot of pitchers in the minor leagues who, you know, throw their breaking balls 75 to 80 miles an hour, but in the major leagues, a lot of the breaking balls are like 85 to almost 90 miles an hour now. So teams have really determined that fast, hard breaking balls are much more successful. Bigger movement, generally harder to hit. That's kind of, you know, intuitive. And then this is interesting. Pitchers with unique movement profiles perform better. So it's important to deviate from the average. And you can see on the chart here that kind of the shaded region are what the average would be. So that's kind of what hitters have kind of grown up experiencing. They've experienced, you know, pitches of fast, you know, they experience these kind of fastballs all their lives. So any type of pitch that can kind of deviate from what they would expect is generally more successful. And to go along those lines, fastballs that drop less than expected generate more misses. So when these studies first came out, these really big backspin fastballs that have almost like a straight vertical approach, they would almost like pure backspin was kind of in vogue, because they would, hitters would see them, and they would kind of get a lot of swings and misses above the barrel, because they kind of stay on plane more than hitters would expect. But we'll talk about in the next couple slides about how that's changed a little bit. But the fastballs that are on the 130 axis, so if you were to think about this chart as a clock, where 12, 1, 2, kind of these 130 fastballs they're really kind of don't perform very well at all, even when controlling for velocity. So this is kind of a big revelation, because for a while scouts thought any type of fastball that was 95 or 100 miles an hour was really good. But what we determined that these specific fastballs that are kind of on this 130 line, which is almost like this chart, it's almost like where the two-seam cluster is, those really don't perform well. And the thinking is that because growing up, most pitches resemble that shape, and so hitters get very accustomed to seeing that shape. So even if even like a 97 mile an hour fastball that has that movement profile, they don't perform very well. And this have a lot of impact on like draft strategy, because like I was saying before, it's very hard to change your pitch movements without changing your arm slot. So if you're scouting a pitcher in college or high school and they have this 130 fastball, teams are often just kind of writing them off as like a big red flag. What the data misses. So pitch location, obviously, that's a huge part of this is you can have really bad clusters or really kind of generic movements, but if you're executing your pitches well, this might just not be it's that you can also be effective that way. Pitcher height or mound location, that's a big one. And then deception. So we'll talk about what deception means, but delayed or obscured ball reveal, extension, how far you're releasing the ball from the pitcher's mound, kind of high spin rate, and then a mismatch between arm angle and expected movement. That's a big one. And lately, to kind of go off that, these vertical approach angle or flat fastball is what they call it, has been a term that teams are kind of playing with right now. And what a vertical approach angle means is the angle at which a ball vertically crosses in front of home plate measured in degrees. So two examples here. The picture on the left is like an extreme flat angle, and the picture on the right is almost like a straight up and down angle. So here's an example of what a flat fastball look like. As you can see from this picture, this is his arm is kind of a low release, and what you see here is it's low release, but the movement is not your typical like with a lot of run or a lot of horizontal movement. It kind of stays straight, and it almost in the video you can kind of see the ball almost like it's shooting up, right? Like it's kind of like shooting up there. You kind of see how it's like kind of going up a little bit. It's not obviously going up, but to the hitter it appears like it's going up. So this has been last year or two. Teams are really trying to acquire these pitchers with these flat fastballs. For a while, it was, getting these, to kind of create this effect, you need like a pitcher who had, it was like a straight kind of very, very high, steep angle, and they were just pure backspin on the ball. But what we've discovered is the teams, pitchers with these kind of flat fastballs can also create that effect where it's kind of like rising, and these pitchers get a lot of swings and misses at the top of the zone. And this pitch right here is only 92 miles an hour, which is kind of below the average, the major league average for a fastball. But it's these flat fastballs almost seem like to not, velocity really does not have much impact on success. So you can have a lot of success with like low velocity. So it's kind of a kind of this new trend in baseball is to go for pitchers with these flat fastballs like this. Some other examples of how these pitch graders might not account for, different types of deception. This picture right here, you can kind of see how the ball kind of stays behind his leg for a long time. We'll play it again just so you can kind of see how it looks. So the hitter has a really hard time kind of picking up the ball. Again, this pitch is 93 miles an hour, so it's not like really that fast in terms of major league velocity, but it's very effective because the hitter doesn't see it until end. And this would not be picked up on one of those movement charts. Hard to see from this angle, but this pitcher has big extensions. See how he kind of like really kind of strides down the mound. So he's releasing the ball almost 7.5 inches in front of the pitcher's mound. So his fastball that's 92 miles an hour is playing much faster than what the velocity shows there. And then obviously you have unique arm angles. This is kind of the most extreme unique arm angle, but that's not accounted for in one of those movement charts. So taking that information and kind of marrying the two together. So you have these radar systems and then you have these high-speed cameras. You can really do a lot of impactful kind of player development with that information. We'll kind of show you here just this quick 1-minute video of how players are using this to their advantage.
So 0 can we get, which is going to be in this area. And then right here, that 8 o'clock, we want that true side spin at 9, or if anything, a little bit of that 10 o'clock spin. Oh, nope. Okay. How comfortable are you with that grip?
Comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. Would you be down to try another different one real quick?
Sure.
Okay. It's a little bit easier to get on the side of the baseball with that whole horseshoe. So if you want to do the same grip, spike, whatever you want, just really thinking when we're releasing it instead of here, we're just trying to grip it down on its side and get that true side spin.
Okay.
I mean, there it is. Beautiful.
So as you can see here, this is like an incredibly powerful tool. And if you think of a major league player who is very in tune with their body and very in tune with their craft, they could quickly develop, a really powerful pitch, really good pitch, within minutes even. I mean, even with, and really perfected in like one off season. What they didn't show here is, the high-speed cameras are often play a big role in these pitch development sessions. It's all real-time feedback. You throw the pitch, you look at the high-speed camera, how the pitcher's releasing it, and you get the data, right then and there, right after you throw the pitch. So within an hour or two, you can almost perfect the kind of pitch you want. So what kind of impact has this had on Major League Baseball? It's made traditional scouting much more challenging. You can get a pitcher who doesn't have a very good slider one year, and then, within a couple of months in the offseason, they come back and they're throwing a completely different pitch. So it's made, traditional scouting and just evaluation much more difficult. And it's allowed pitchers to significantly outpace hitters in terms of how well they're succeeding. So in this chart right here, you see that average strikeouts per game starting in 2015, it's gone up every single year. So right now, Major League Baseball is just awash with strikeouts. Pitchers are just, they know how to get hitters out. They know how to develop their pitches in a certain way that are going to get hitters out, and they're just using that to their advantage. As you can see, since 2005 really is when it started, but this graph goes 2015. But strikeouts have gone up in each season. And last year, the strikeout percentage was 22.9%. In 2005, it was 16.4%. Just kind of show you how big a difference this is. This has been in the game. Major League Baseball has reckoned with this, and they've tried introducing several rule changes to kind of curtail strikeouts, but none have really significantly been effective. It's just, there's too much. Pitchers have too much movement, and they've been able to kind of, precisely, fine-tune their pitches in a way that have kind of really changed the game. Kind of conversely, hitters have had to maximize the impact on their swings. So they had to be willing to trade strikeouts for home runs, right? Because contact is down, singles are down. You have to be able to, get the most out of your swings when you take them. So in this chart, it's kind of hard to see, but this is just at-bats per home runs, right? In 2005, it was, I think, about 35, and last year it was about 23 or 24 at-bats per home run. So a lot more home runs are being hit now because hitters know that they're going to swing and miss a lot, so they have to do the most damage when they take their swings. So how can the balance swing back? and this is kind of the, what I'll end on this is kind of the latest technology is for hitters to kind of combat this new environment with pitchers, having these really great pitches is this new piece of technology that has just been introduced.
That is probably the most realistic pitching machine of all time. It's like a very, very, very souped up version of a pitching machine that you would see like in a mall arcade or something like that, where there's a picture up of a pitcher throwing and this ball just comes out of the chute. But the biggest difference here is it dials in the pitch shapes, velocities, and makes it truly a direct representation of what real life baseball is facing a certain pitcher. The ability to display an MLB pitcher, a minor league pitcher, somebody you're going to face that night. This machine gives you the ability to train at the highest, most game-like conditions possible.
John Ram decided to invest in a trajectory machine because one, it's the only machine on the market that can throw every pitch in the big leagues. It can actually replicate gyro spin correctly, no other machine can. Of course, it has the video board, highly accurate. Release points can go up and down, left and right. And as a result, it becomes the ultimate training tool for our hitters.
So that's it. So that's kind of where we're at right now is the Orioles invested in this machine last year. And hitters have kind of taken to it. One thing they've realized is that because the pitches are so good, they often don't want to use it and feel like they get embarrassed. So they've actually had to develop special baseballs for them to want to use it because they're worried that they're going to break their bats or get jammed and damage their fingers. So it's been kind of a slow process, but that's kind of how hitters are clawing back against these pitchers is by using this pitching machine. So
we're gonna have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions.
yeah.
I need to use the microphone when we ask questions. So
Sure.
So again, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
I want to bring up Zoom. My first question was when the technology first came into using video, where was the video coming from? Was it just standard feed from the MLB or how did that work?
Yes, that's a good question. So there are a bunch of vendors who specialize in taking clipped video from every game, okay. and they have an agreement with Major League Baseball where they distribute that video among all 30 teams. Now, that was part of my job was to kind of record the Orioles games, and when you record your own game, you can do different cameras and different angles, and but there's kind of this central database where every team is getting clip video, and they can kind of do with what they want. But there is teams have their own video coordinators who clip their own games and can you're not allowed to set up cameras. That's a competitive advantage, but you can, change duration length or, do specific things with the video that coaches request. But there's a centralized system where each team gets access to video. Yeah, right. It's equal.
Or you can have your own, but you said you can't set up cameras on your opponent.
You can't do that. No, that's very, very illegal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is anyone ever searching social media for injuries and other sort of pieces of info they can use for their advanced scouting?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the job is just sourcing information from newspapers or beat writers or talking to other people and just kind of gain the most information you can. A lot of it is teams are aware that other teams are trying to get this information, so they're very cognizant of what they say to the media, and but you kind of have to just. There's also a lot you can just kind of interpret things. So if a player hasn't played in a couple of days, and you can kind of go back and watch their recent games and figure out, oh, this player might have injured his ankle or something in this play, and that's why they're not playing. You can, but yeah, I mean that's a good question.
And then You said that the technology was inexpensive, the radar. So like what's inexpensive?
Yeah, so like the portable version is I think like $12,000. The mounted version is I think like $20,000. So for teams, this is like not a lot of money.
Sure.
And Major League Baseball players, this is not a lot of money.
Not the trajectory.
That is significantly more expensive. That's I think $500,000. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty neat system. And
Yeah.
all the data, so is all the data from those pitch charts and all the pitch collections, is that essentially what goes into the trajectory?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's not much has changed with that data, right? So that data is just taking the horizontal movement, the induced vertical break, the velocity. Teams have gotten a lot better at incorporating a lot of those like this deception points that I was talking about. It's like arm angle, ball late ball reveal into their models. But for traject, it's mostly just horizontal break, induced vertical break, and velocity. And the big thing with traject is what I mean, the video would explain it longer, but what it's done is it has most pitching machines have kind of two wheels. This traject, they've built like a third wheel, which is how they've been able to replicate that gyro spin. So it's for the longest time, pitching machines were kind of you kind of two spinning wheels and shoot out a pitch, right? This one has a third wheel, which has been able to really pinpoint the spin on the ball.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you said, actually, you mentioned Houston several times. Like, are they like the cutting edge of advanced scouting?
They were, yeah, for a long time. And a lot of people from Houston came to the Orioles. So like this, yeah. So they, for a long time, were kind of pioneers in this space. They were the first team to really invest heavily in those cameras. They were one of the first teams to create a pitch grader model like that. And a lot of those people who worked for Houston came over to the Orioles and kind of took that technology with them.
From that last shot with like, those look like kids, like almost like
Yeah.
late high school,
Yeah.
like college.
Yeah.
So is this just becoming commoditized? Like, so can you really just get yourself into, like, are there clinics just set up where it's all like they've got the equipment, maybe not the traject, but they've got like all the other equipment. You go in, you do sessions, you get better kind of thing in ways that were unheard of 20 years ago.
Unheard of. Yeah, this has become standard. I mean, the radar, the TrackMan and the Hawkeye, we didn't talk about Hawkeye, but Hawkeye is basically a souped up version of TrackMan. It's what teams are using now. But TrackMan is just, I mean, it's just like prevalent at every college, every major high school. So this is going on.
Really?
Oh yeah.
What the TrackMan costs.
That's what the $12,000. Yeah. So that's just, I mean, this is going on at every level. Yeah. So, I mean, what we're seeing is, and that's why the pitching has just gotten to be so good, is just because pitchers for a long time now have had access to information and they've been able to kind of precisely fine tune their pitches in a way that hitters just haven't been able to react to. But this new pitching machine is, hopefully going to kind of even the playing ground, even the ground.
Are hitters not in response, but are hitters doing things in ways that are making the game different? Or is that still, they've just been hitting like they have since 1920?
That's a good question. Yeah, they're definitely, I mean, they're remarkable athletes. So just by facing pitchers who are throwing these pitches, they're getting better at it.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of like hitting technology, which we didn't cover in here, but there's technology now that can kind of fine tune your swing. Almost like a lot of technologies came from golf. Golf's like a big sport with pretty advanced technology. So they've taken a lot of like rotational swing from golf, and they can pinpoint, how much your hip is turning, what your arm is doing, and kind of figure out like an optimized swing based on how you move. Mm-hmm. The Orioles have started doing that, so they can determine, you might have to work on your like hip dissociation. Your hip's not turning enough. Here's some exercise you could do to make that better. And that is so like, hitters kind of know how to improve their swings, along with just, seeing these pitchers throw these pitches and knowing that, they can sacrifice swings and misses and singles for home runs is like an effective strategy. Mm-hmm. they can kind of claw away at some of the advantages that pitchers have had.
What other questions? You have any questions, Michael?
Sure. So there has been, I believe, a documented increase in injuries to pitchers. Has any of this data been used to look at why that might be happening? And is trying to adapt to this thing perhaps contributing? If I don't know if the increase has happened recently, but is that a possible contributing factor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this has a lot to do with it. I mean, pitchers are now throwing, they're throwing as hard as they can with as much spin as they can, with as much torque on the elbow as possible, like every pitch, right? Like it used to be, you would kind of limit your pitch, you limit your exertion, over the course of a one start or, one outing. And now it's every pitch, you're kind of maximum effort. To answer your question, I think a lot of this is contributing to injuries, more so probably velocity and just pitchers being trained to throw as hard as they can from like early ages. But certainly, there are pitchers that, like we had a lot of pitchers on the Orioles who they would not, like we would come to them and say, hey, we want you to throw your pitch this way. We want this is, this pitch grader has, if you throw a pitch like this, it's gonna be really good. And they would say, oh, I can't do that. It hurts my elbow, right? Like, so they would say, I don't want to do that. I'm sure there are pitchers who would say, okay, I'll do that. That'll make me a lot of money. And just kind of, it breaks your elbow, right? So, to answer, I mean, the pitches like the sweeper, right? Like that's kind of been the one pitch that I think a lot of people turn to and say that's caused a lot of pitching injuries is the one where you really have to kind of pronate a lot and really kind of come through like that. And it's caused a lot of pain in the elbow.
So even like video games have to be different now because of the way this stuff is happening. Because I was just thinking when you said that, they used to like throw one or two big ones a game or like kind of like really taper their time. Like if you remember like RBI baseball, like all those games, like you only got a couple good pitches before you start to lose speed or you lose control or something because they were trying to mimic the real world. But it sounds like today they're just firing at force.
And you see it in roster, how rosters are constructed, right? So like, pitchers are only being asked to, starting pitchers are only going 5 innings now, as opposed to, 8, 9 innings back, 30 years ago. Teams are carrying a lot more relief pitchers and they're, cycling them through. Like they're only asked to throw 10 or 11 pitches, maybe once every couple of days. And they just like go out there and throw as hard as you can and make as much movement as possible. And then do it again in like a 3 or 4 days. Right. And it's just like, it used to be pitchers would, throw 200, 300 innings and, you'd only have 6 pitchers in the bullpen and they would have to throw a lot of innings. So, but now it's just changed completely. And it's just, these pitchers come up and they are asked to throw 10 to 15 pitches in an outing as hard as they can and at maximum, movement and do it again in 3 or 4 days. And, the bench, right. And it's had profound impacts on on the game.
It seems like that's a rule that MLB could adjust, basically limit the amount of turnover.
That you would think so, but they've kind of danced around that subject. I think that's kind of the next rule they're going to implement is limits on how many pitchers teams can carry. One extreme would be to move the mound back, which would really solve a lot of these problems. They're very reluctant to do that because there are a lot of purists who would say they have to, but they need to fix this because it's. There's a lot of, fans, they poll fans and they say, there are too many strikeouts, there's too much downtime, there's too much, and they don't like it. So they have to.
Is a swing and a miss, or it just can be in the strike zone?
A strikeout is a bat that ends in a swing and a miss or a strikeout. But to your point, there are a lot of swings and misses and just a lot of like downtime overall, a lot of balls, right? Pitchers are throwing a lot of balls because they're trying to throw as hard as they can. And it's hard to throw strikes when you're throwing at maximum velocity or maximum effort. A lot of swings and misses and just causes a lot of just kind of downtime for the game.
A lot of fouls, I'd imagine.
A lot of like clip contact, a lot of fouls.
For sure.
Are you seeing shorter pitcher careers?
Yes. Yep.
I think that the technology will for that and maybe prevent injuries.
I don't. That's a good question. I don't know what's going to happen with injury. I mean, I know that's kind of outside my area of expertise. these pitcher injuries. I mean, but it's just this is so common, right? You see, it's almost like expected now, where like pitchers, they throw for a couple of years and then they have surgery and they, come back in 2 years and try to do it again. And it's tough because you get a lot of these like star pitchers who fans love to see, and they miss an entire season. There's no other sport that like has that problem. It's just like it's unique to baseball, where you're taking this whole subset of players and just like removing them for like a year because they're hurt. So they kind of have to figure that out. But I mean, it's as long as like pitchers are this type of technology is helping pitchers get better and making them money, that's not going to change. Like they'll be happy to sacrifice some years of their career. They can make a lot of money by doing this for a short amount of time.
The trajectory feels like virtual reality. You know what I mean? Like it's as close to like a simulated environment that you would do, because you're actually still getting the full physical contact of the ball, the speed of the hit and stuff. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, the Orioles invested in one last year, and players were very excited about it. There's still some tweaks that need to work out. Like I said, like it's almost too good. Like players would go in there and they would like break their bats, or like they would get a ball off like the hands and like call it. They don't want to practice in that type of environment. So they've developed like a special kind of softer ball to use with the machine that allows them to not feel as much like impact when they swing. There's also some yeah, they're like glorified Nerf balls, right? Yeah. I mean, they've also had some issues, with the mechanics of the machine. Like it's very complicated with, the wheels and so like keeping it running has been kind of hard. And like programming the machine also takes a lot of work. You have to program in for each pitcher, you have to program in the coordinates, and there's a lot of work, a lot of setup involved with making the machine go. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Ben, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, it was a lot of
really
fun.
appreciate it. I learned so much. And the phrase "talking inside baseball," I have never actually like experienced talking inside baseball, and I really feel like we just did.
Yeah.
That was pretty deep.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun doing this. This is really great.
Great. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.